in Gibson's, we recognize nature and the ecosystem services that we provide as very fundamental components of the overall infrastructure systems. And we're very fortunate to have a class of assets from eco-assets that are very rich from our perspective, and we benefit from an aquifer that provides very premium quality water at no storage charge. We certainly only count from the pump forward. We've got 3 major creeks that provide over 90% of our rainwater management. We've got a foreshore area that's still mostly in a natural state, and that provides, having been involved in redesigning failed walls, and suddenly the Georgia Strait is full of failed retaining walls. It's substantially cheaper to maintain it in a natural state, or at least to rebuild it to that level, the green shores approach. And we've got other assets as well, and I'll get into that in a quick second. Typically, what we're trying to do in Gibson's is develop a model to manage our natural assets in the same way we manage engineered assets. And while there is no specific model, we think there's a lot of things we can do right away. And so if you look at a typical list of assets, that's standard, for example, there's roads, buildings, water, sewer, and drainage infrastructure. Clearly, we have a lot more than that. And we also believe that when you look at natural capital and the whole list of natural capital, we're not suggesting that all of them provide a municipal function. And I think I want to make a differentiation between, for example, trees, soil, other green spaces, and water provides all the services we'll be talking about this morning. And very specifically, they provide a municipal function. Air minerals in the marine environments, while from an ecosystem services are endless in terms of the benefits they give us, they're outside of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to manage those assets per se. And so, as I like to remind some of my council members, we're not trying to, this is not about habitat, it's not about birds and bees, it's about municipal infrastructure. And a quick aside from the political perspective, we have politics in Gibson's is a bit of a sport. And you've got at least 2 teams you can choose from, in some cases 3. And you've got a strong contingency that is interested in conserving and protecting, and another group that is interested in developing at all costs. And I'm trying to be somewhat in the middle. And our strategy is to say we want to protect the creek, not again for birds and bees, but because it costs us pennies on the dollar if we have to replace that creek with a stormwater system. So you might not be very environmentally inclined, but you're financially astute, and maybe, so we're getting support from both sides, and you don't have to, the implication is there enough that we don't necessarily have to mention it. So we have essentially created subcategories in our list of assets. We've got water assets, but we also subdivide those into those that are engineered, those that are natural, and those that are nature-like from a biomimicry perspective. And so just last night, we completed the whole, and council received our revised asset management policy, and it has definitions for both engineered and natural assets, and there's categories with subcategories for these assets. It's just part of managing it. You might be wondering, sort of, from a value perspective, we've been trying to do a fair amount of work on it. MasterCard might suggest that it's priceless, and it is priceless. We really don't have a dollar value for that creek, but we do want to find that dollar value. But we do know that just looking at our current budgets, that it costs substantially less to operate that natural stormwater management. It lasts substantially longer than anything we could ever build. It's carbon neutral. In some cases, it can be carbon positive. We're looking at grass plays on the foreshore area from a carbon sinking perspective, and also from the role that it plays in mitigating wave action. I think there's a benefit there. And for those that are sort of dying to have a number, I guess a number you can consider is we've got, let's say, 3.5 kilometers of creek, and that conveys, we know roughly what that number or amount of water is. So if you had to engineer a system to deliver that much water, that's roughly a base number, not to mention the rest. There's no depreciation costs. All of part of our asset management plans, we've taken a serious financial, I wouldn't call it financial hit, sort of a financial awakening, realizing that there's depreciation to assets, except that natural assets, you don't have to do that in your accounting. And we are beginning the valuation of our natural assets, and particularly the value of the municipal service contribution that it provides. And we're starting with our Gibson's Aquifer. I kind of helps to be the boss for once in a while. And so I suggested to our finance department that they amend the financial statements to include a note that the value of our assets is not fairly represented in the number that it shows. So can you imagine how that went? But that led to a meeting with our financial auditors, and then to a meeting with the boss of the financial auditors. Because what I was trying to get at is, of course, I was talking from the perspective of environmental management and asset management, and they're in the auditing business, not in that business. And until I mentioned sort of risk and liability, and then sort of lights, sirens went off, and it's like, oh, we are onto something, because we have an exposure from a delivery of water to our residents. If that aquifer is not there or something happens to it, having a pump is not enough, because you actually need the water. So what should we be putting aside to have sort of a plan B in place? And so that was sort of the approach to leading to an asterisk in note number 7 in our financial statements, which reads something like this. Now, this is exactly like this, actually. The town is fortunate to have many natural assets that reduce the need for man-made infrastructure that would otherwise be required. This includes the Gibson's Aquifer, water storage and filtration, creeks, ditches, and wetlands, rainwater management, and the foreshore area, which is a natural seawall. Canadian public sector accounting standards do not allow for the valuation and recording of such assets into the financial statements of the town. As such, these natural assets are not reported in these financial statements. Nevertheless, the town acknowledges the importance of these assets and the need to manage them in conjunction with man-made infrastructure. So that sort of opened the door to what is that standard. The last time the public sector accounting set a standard was called 3150, which led to asset management. I'd like to work on 3151, maybe that number is already taken, which is what is the formula to recognize these natural assets in our books. We've also been spending a fair amount of time on education, from not just for ourselves, but for our community as well. And so we have Eco Dialogue series coming up this fall. There are a couple of sponsors for that as well. Just to try to sort of lay out, we'll have some folks talk about from an engineering aspect, both of engineer assets and natural assets, and also ecosystems valuation, just to really help people connect with that, the assets they already have, because they recognize that the town maintains this road, but who looks after the creek on the other side, and what value does it have, and how do I relate to that? And so we want to help them do that. We've also partnered with the school district, and we started delivering a program this year it's an art project in the elementary schools, where these kids are in essence building models of our aquifer. in May of last year, we released our 504-page aquifer mapping study, and very few people will read it from front to back, but yet in a space of 2 hours, a class will understand that it takes a drop of water 9 years to go through the mountain and filtrate, get into the aquifer. It has several layers to an aquifer in our case, and what layers there are, and now Vachon Till Aquatard is, ask a 5-year-old, they probably know what it is. I certainly didn't know before May of last year, but that's the cap of the aquifer, by the way. And so we're using the pieces they are creating, we're placing them along several waterways because they're made of the same materials the aquifer has. And so that is a much better way to communicate our project than putting a link on our website for somebody to download that report. We've also have a little bit of a walking tour called Walk on Water, where there's sort of educational panels that folks can take a nice stroll, but also learn about the features of the aquifer, whether it's just a pump house or other type of geological features, helping them connect with that. And from an inter-regional cooperation perspective, we are working with the Ministry of Forests about the realization that our aquifer recharge area is not in town per se. In fact, it's up on a mountain, and yet it's a forested area, which is under license for recent timber sales. And so we've been exchanging information and also leading to designations of that area as a recharge area that comes with sort of DP development program guideline like type of approach, so that we're not interested in impeding or objecting to forestry practices, but we're interested in protecting obviously the recharge area, and so we're coming together and planning that. And we also including the regional district because they sit somewhere in between our two levels of government as well. Partnering with a couple of universities, Royal Roads being one, because we want to find students that are interested, that have both an environmental interest and an economic interest to accounting, because that's the type of skills that I think you're going to need to try to evaluate. David Suzuki Foundation, we work with them too, but most of their folks are bird and bee types, and but they have a lot to share with us, and so we're going to pull all this together and try and come up with something that, again, relates directly to providing a municipal function. We also need to keep maintain our house in order. In essence, there are two things we need to do right away. One is update our practices and update our infrastructure into how it relates to nature. So off any of these roads, there's probably an outfall into a creek, and we have the outfall listed in the assets, but not the creek. Or in that case, we already have the creek, but we forget about the creek until there's so much storm water coming out of that pipe that will erode a bank, and then we hire an engineer to reshape that bank, and then we add those works to our asset lists. So I want to get to that before we cause the damage and amend the design of the storm or the outfall so that we have the least impact on nature to start with. We have service trucks that can respond 24/7 to any water or sewer emergency or road emergency, but yet we don't have tools to respond to a natural emergency. And but we do have a little set now of 4 or 5 straw bales and some landscape ties, and so that we can at least when a bank erodes, train our staff and 2 or 3 of them in stream keepers to what do we do besides calling MOE. So trying to be responsible that way, and the policies I mentioned to you as well. We actually have a very simple yet our goal from the perspective of managing our assets is we want to have the least amount of assets, the most natural, the most energy efficient, that cost the least to operate over the long term. So starting at the beginning, the least amount of assets, because I was telling you earlier about the subdivision standards, we actually don't want 2 sidewalks. 1 is enough. So it's been the right size for subdivision. It would be the equivalent of driving a V8 crew cab 4x4 for 1 person to go down 3 blocks. So sometimes we ask for too much, and so we really had in mind the fact that we were going to pay 80% of that bill. So we really need 2 sidewalks, and we need to sort of airport-like lit up our subdivisions, or do we need less? So we want to have the least amount of assets. We want to have the most natural assets because we know they cost the least. We want to have the most energy efficient because they have the lowest greenhouse gas profile. And if I'm mandated to be carbon neutral, I want to reduce that from the first day. We want to have it costed from a life cycle cost because, and not sort of what a lot of towns still do is, it's a bit like when you get a big check, we get a check every July and say, well, what are we going to do this year? As opposed to thinking about, you know, what are we going to spend for the next 80 years? And one example that I give you is we've got to install a signpost. And we dig a hole, we put a 4x4, we pack around it, and then Parks comes around and they weed whack around that post for a couple of years until we need a new post. So I want to have a concrete foundation with a galvanized metal bracket and then that wood post up above it. So, you know, it will last 40 years rather than 4 years, and maybe cost 10 or 15% more. So that's the type of mentality that we need to change. And if we don't understand that it has a cost from first day to the end, then we're not, we want to buy the cheapest. And I'm saying the cheapest is if you think about the 80 years, not what's the upfront cost alone. So one of the new terms that we used this year became familiar in budget discussions is, you know, there's very quickly a realization when you start doing asset management that you don't have enough money to do everything you need to be doing. There's also a disconnect between the work that we need to be doing to maintain our assets at the highest level and the work that we're currently doing. So to maintain a particular asset, we sometimes, if we can do it in the spring, we do it in the fall. But in the fall, it might not be as effective as doing it in the spring, or skipping a year or skipping 2 years. A perfect example is crack sealing. The best way, the best time to crack seal a road is the first year that it's built, because 4 or 5 years later, if you don't do it, once you pass 7 or 10% of that road, it's too cracked. Then you've got to do a patch. So crack seal might cost you $500 or $1,000. I don't know what the numbers are today per kilometer. A patch might cost you $5,000 or $10,000, and if you have to recap it, then you're into the tens of thousands of dollars or more. So I think we have a responsibility to invest in preventative maintenance, not because, it's sort of, again, that disconnection. It shouldn't be up to the public works director to decide how often we're going to crack seal, or I don't like crack sealing. It doesn't really matter if you don't like it. It's the responsible thing from a financial management. We have to do it. And so it's a big engine that it's running every day. We can't shut it off, and yet we have to retool. That's kind of the process we're going through right now. And deferring works. Conservation, we've reduced our daily average consumption by nearly 40% since 2008. We have avoided or deferred building a reservoir because of that. So we're communicating that to our citizens that slightly less a brown lawn is actually saving them money. And in fact, it hasn't led to brown lawns because there's other ways to save water, and people are being very responsible. And from a political perspective, focusing on our core strengths, it's always a challenge. So going through an exercise everything that we sort of, every Monday when we meet, there's a list of things to do, and we get excited. We want to deal with pipelines and healthcare and education, and fundamentally, we do asset management. That's what we do. If you block everything that we do into a graph or a box that has what's essential, important, and discretionary, and what's under our direct control, what do we have influence over, and what are we concerned about? And you want to spend the majority of your time doing essential items that you have direct control over. That's water, that's sewer, buildings, and I would add that nature is very much part of that. Hospital, pipelines, those are things we're concerned about, but we have very little influence, and as important as they might be. So we want to spend our dollar and our time on essential items over which we have control. And politically, it's been a challenge to find the right words to explain that we simply don't have the time to do everything. Internally, we've had to change our organization to recognize the challenges that we have, and that there's a different way that we need to do things. And so we have departments mostly on paper because we work primarily in teams. And we solve most of our problems through teams, whether it's development related or water related, and there's three basic teams. There's a planning team, project management team, and maintenance and operation. It's unrealistic to expect your parks department that is maintaining trails to develop your pedestrian network. They should be handled with their involvement, of course, but we sometimes expect through the maintenance of our asphalt program to somehow miraculously end up with bike lanes. If you don't ask your public works department to create bike lanes, it's a transportation challenge, and you need a team to plan that. And so we have three teams, and we also basically break our work. If you take every work order that every department gets, you can make three piles: preventative work, sort of breakdowns, or when the solids hit the fan, because you want to have the smallest pile here and the biggest pile here. And at times it feels like we're always on this quadrant. And so most time, because that also costs the least, as I was saying to you earlier. And we're moving from paper to iPad. Our staff, if there's a water main here, Joe and Randy and Mike, they know where the valves are. They can come here in their sleep. But if they're not in, where's the valve? And typically we drive here, oh yeah, it's there, and then we drive back. We look at the map on the wall and say, there's a shut off there, and then we drive back. And it's not always that bad, but it's almost always that bad. We want them to be able to look at the GIS system that says there's gas, there's electricity, there's our water main, there's the valve, there's the property line, and if you want more responsive and response from that issue, then we have to give our staff the tools. So we've invested a lot also in technology and plans so that our staff can do their work better. It's asset management 2.0. Recognize it as that. So I think I'm just wrapping up, and in essence, recognizing the role of nature, developing a program to manage it according to the same way that we're managing other assets, and implementing stewardship and monitoring programs, and in essence investing dollars or pennies to save dollars later on by thinking for the long term. So thank you very much. Thank you.